You think awakening is gentle? No, baby, it's a fire. And that fire doesn't just warm you, it burns everything false down to the bone. The awakening doesn't whisper your name in the soft hours of dawn. It doesn't knock politely at the doors of your understanding, asking, "Are you ready?" No, it comes like a thunderclap, mid-sentence, mid-life, mid-lie. It comes when you least expect it, when everything appears calm. When the job is good, the love is enough, and the smiles come easy. That's when it strikes. Because spiritual awakening isn't triggered by perfection. It's summoned by soul starvation, the quiet kind, the kind that you ignore for years because life looked right, even if it never felt right. One day, you're sipping coffee, scrolling through your phone, performing your usual dance with the day, and then it hits you. Not all at once, but in fragments, in sudden discomfort with things that used to thrill you, in a strange emptiness that no praise or possession can fill, in questions that used to sleep quietly inside you, but now scream without warning, "What am I doing? Why does none of this feel real? Who have I become?" This is how awakening begins, with disruption, with discomfort, with divine disassembly. It does not enter to comfort you, it enters to confront you. And it does not seek your permission because it already knows who you really are, even if you don't. You were never built to live a life of repetition, disconnection, or performance. And the awakening comes to reclaim what's been buried beneath roles, responsibilities, and 1,000 shoulds that never belonged to you in the first place. But most people don't recognize it at first. They think it's burnout, depression, or failure. They run to doctors, partners, new jobs, new hobbies, distractions, all to quiet the rising tide within. But that tide can't be silenced, only surrendered to, because what's coming isn't trying to break you, it's trying to break you open. And once that door opens, everything shifts. The music you used to love might now irritate you. The conversations you once enjoyed now feel hollow. The people you surrounded yourself with might feel distant, disconnected, foreign. You're not better than them. You're just being pulled deeper than you've ever been. It's not that you're changing overnight. It's that you're finally being asked to see with new eyes, to hear with new ears, and to feel with a heart no longer hardened by convenience and comfort. There is no neat timeline, no checklist for this kind of unfolding. Some awakenings are violent, a sudden loss, a heartbreak, a betrayal that slices through illusion. Others are subtle, a gentle sense of restlessness, a hunger for meaning, a whisper in the silence that says, "There's more than this." But regardless of how it begins, it always demands something sacred, the death of denial. You cannot sleepwalk through awakening. You cannot carry your old self into a new dimension of truth. And so the parts of you that are rooted in survival, people-pleasing, perfectionism, pride, begin to shake loose. It's terrifying because the ground beneath you begins to crumble and everything you called security starts to feel like a trap. The job title, the relationship, the identity, you start to realize they were costumes, not essence. And that realization, it unravels you. This is why most people retreat. They don't want to be unraveled. They want the light without the fire, the clarity without the chaos. But awakening doesn't barter. It doesn't hand you transformation wrapped in silk. It comes with dust, with ashes, with echoes of the self you thought you were. It asks you to choose comfort or consciousness, illusion or intimacy with truth. And here's the secret no one tells you. Awakening will cost you. You will cry. You will grieve. You will lose friends, lose interest in things that once consumed you, lose the version of yourself you spent decades polishing. But what you lose was never truly yours. What remains is sacred. What remains is real. That's why awakening doesn't ask permission. Because it knows if it did, most would never say yes. Most would cling to the familiar, to the numbness, to the predictability of pain. Most would say, "Let me wait until I'm ready." But you're never ready. No one ever is. That's why it invades. That's why it comes like lightning, not to harm you, but to illuminate you. You are not being punished when the ground shakes. You are being invited. You are not broken when everything falls apart. You are breaking free. The awakening doesn't arrive to comfort your ego. It comes to awaken your soul. And the soul is not here to be polite. It's here to be powerful. So when that fire comes, don't run. Don't beg for the old life to return. Stand in the ruins. Let the false fall away. Because what rises from that ruin is you. Not the version shaped by expectation, but the version forged in truth. And that version, it doesn't just survive the awakening, it becomes the awakening. When the soul starts to wake, the ego doesn't whisper. It roars. It throws tantrums like a child who's had their favorite toy taken away. It scrambles to survive because it senses it's no longer the master. That's why, right at the edge of your greatest transformation, you'll feel your greatest fear. That's the ego's last stand. It's loud, it's desperate, and it's clever. It knows all your pressure points. It speaks in your voice, but it's not your truth. It's your mask, stitched together with every belief you inherited but never questioned. See, the ego is not evil. It was built to protect you. It learned to keep you safe in a world that told you who to be, how to act, and what to hide. It's the armor you wore when love felt conditional. It's the performance you gave to avoid being abandoned. But what was once protection becomes prison. And when awakening begins, the walls of that prison start to crack. That's when the ego panics, because spiritual awakening is not a makeover. It's a dismantling. It's not interested in decorating your cage. It wants to break the whole thing open. And the ego, it will do everything it can to convince you that freedom is danger, that truth is too much, and that staying small is safety. It will shout, "What if they leave you?" It will whisper, "You're nothing without your titles." It will remind you of every past mistake, every failure, every time you were rejected, and it will say, "You see, this is why you must stay where it's familiar." That screaming, that fear, that anxiety, it isn't a sign that you're going the wrong way. It's a sign that you're getting close. The ego only screams when it feels threatened. And what threatens it most is your awakening. Because in awakening, your identity is no longer defined by survival. It's no longer built on validation, applause, or control. Awakening says, "I am not my pain." It says, "I am not what they called me." It says, "I will be free even if I am misunderstood." And that terrifies the ego. You'll notice it in the small ways first. You'll start to speak your truth more, and the ego will tremble. You'll begin saying no to things that once got your yes, and it will cry betrayal. You'll set boundaries where you used to bleed for approval, and the ego will call you selfish. Why? Because the ego survives through roles. If you stop performing, it starts dying. If you stop apologizing for existing, it loses its grip. This death isn't quick. It's a slow surrender. You may let go of one mask only to realize there are 5 more. You may think you've done the work only to find another wound buried deeper. That's the path. It's layered, it's humbling, and it requires grace. Because every time you peel something back, your ego will beg you to stop. Not because it's wicked, but because it's afraid. It's afraid that without your roles, you won't be loved. Without your hustle, you won't be worthy. Without your image, you won't be enough. But the truth is, your soul has never needed those things. The soul doesn't compete, it doesn't strive, it doesn't chase applause. It already knows it's worthy, it already knows it's whole. The only thing in the way is the voice that says, prove yourself, be liked, be needed, be perfect. That voice is not you. It's the echo of survival, and it fades when you stop feeding it. So what does it mean to let the ego die? It means no longer reacting to every opinion. It means no longer shrinking yourself to be digestible. It means choosing truth over comfort and alignment over attention. It means becoming so deeply rooted in your essence that external chaos can't uproot your peace. But don't expect applause for this. Most of the world still worships ego. Most of the world confuses loudness with power, performance with purpose. When you start shedding ego, you'll feel misunderstood. You may lose people who loved the version of you that didn't love yourself. That's part of the shedding. It hurts. But what you gain is something eternal, self-intimacy, clarity, and the kind of peace that no circumstance can steal. There will be moments when the ego fights back with everything it has. It will question your sanity. It will seduce you with old identities. It will try to make you prove something again. But you'll know better. You'll feel the difference between noise and knowing. You'll begin to see the ego's games and you'll stop playing. And in time, the screaming will quiet. Not because you silence the ego by force, but because you stop believing its lies. You didn't kill it, you transcended it. You loved it enough to let it rest. And from that silence, something deeper will rise. Something softer, something stronger. Not a new identity to impress the world, but the truth of who you've always been beneath the masks, behind the performance, beyond the fear. When the soul begins to awaken, the world begins to retreat. Friends disappear, conversations fall flat, invitations stop coming, the room gets quieter, the days get longer, and the nights, oh, the nights start to echo. This is the chapter where most begin to panic, where silence feels like punishment and solitude feels like abandonment. But this is not your ending. This is your entrance. What feels like isolation is not your burial, it's your birth. There's a reason the caterpillar enters the cocoon alone. No one comes with it. No one holds its hand. It climbs into that darkness willingly, instinctively, and what happens inside cannot be seen. It cannot be explained. Only later, when wings unfurl, does the world understand what was really happening. And so it is with you. Awakening demands solitude because your transformation is sacred. It is personal. It is not a group project. But we are not taught to sit with ourselves. We are taught to gather noise, to seek distraction, to fill every quiet space with sound, and every moment of discomfort with company. We are praised for being surrounded, for being in demand, for being wanted. So when the soul calls us inward, we resist. We reach out for people who no longer reach back. We cling to conversations that feel like dust. We chase connection even when our spirit is asking for space. Yet the silence keeps pressing. It becomes unavoidable. You wake up one morning and realize the phone doesn't ring like it used to. The texts go unanswered. The people you once thought you couldn't live without suddenly vanish without farewell. And in that moment, you are left with nothing but yourself. That's when the work begins. That's when the questions grow teeth. Who am I without them? What do I believe when no one is watching? What kind of truth lives inside me when the world falls away? This is the sacred doorway of isolation. It strips you, not to harm you, but to reveal you, because the you that's rising now, the real you, needs space to stretch, needs room to breathe. The soul doesn't blossom under a spotlight. It blooms in shadow, in stillness, in the hush of aloneness. And while the ego may scream that you're being forgotten, the soul knows you're being remembered, not by others, by yourself. It is in isolation that illusions fall. You start to see where you were bending to fit, where you were giving to be accepted, where you were speaking just to be heard. And as that awareness grows, so does your strength. You begin to enjoy your own company. You begin to trust your own voice. You start doing things not for applause, not for validation, but for alignment. Your days become slower but richer. Your world becomes smaller but truer. This process is not romantic. It is raw. There are nights when the silence feels too loud, when loneliness wraps around you like a fog, when you question if you're broken or just being broken open. But hold on, don't rush this part. Don't try to escape it. Because right here in the middle of this quiet is the clearing, the detachment, the detox. It's where all the not you parts fall away, and only what's real can remain. You'll notice strange things happening. You'll start to feel peace in places that once brought anxiety. You'll walk away from people you once begged to stay. You'll let go without needing closure, forgive without needing apologies, and release without needing to explain. That's what isolation does. It refines you. It teaches you how to love without losing yourself, how to give without emptying your soul, and how to stand alone without feeling abandoned. And when you come out, because yes, you will come out, it won't be as the same person who entered. You won't be desperate for noise. You won't chase shallow friendships. You won't settle for surface level living. You'll walk differently. You'll speak with intention. You'll move with clarity, not because you read a book or heard a sermon, but because you met yourself in the silence and you didn't flinch. This kind of growth terrifies those who still need the crowd to feel real, but you won't blame them. You'll bless them and move on because you've known the weight of being alone and you've learned it wasn't a curse, it was a calling. So let the quiet come, let the room empty, let the text stop, let the night stretch long. This is not your grave, this is your cocoon. And when it's time, when the soul is ready, you won't have to chase anyone. You'll emerge, and everything meant for you will recognize the wings you earned in the dark. The moment you begin to awaken, truly awaken, the world around you starts to shift. But it doesn't celebrate. It doesn't welcome your clarity with open arms. Instead, it tries to hush you. It tries to cradle you back into comfort, coax you back into numbness, and wrap you once again in the warm blanket of unconscious living. Because your awakening is not just a personal shift, it is a quiet rebellion against everything the world told you was truth. You start to see it all, the distractions, the noise, the lies you were fed since childhood, how success was defined for you, how love was sold to you, how your worth was tied to how much you could produce, perform, or please. And once your eyes open, you can't unsee it. The billboards feel louder, the media feels hollow, the conversations feel scripted, and the world, it starts to feel like a play you no longer have the energy to act in. But here's the part no one warns you about. Once you wake up, the world will do everything in its power to rock you back to sleep. It will come dressed in old comforts, in familiar habits, in friends who remind you of who you used to be. You'll be tempted to reach back, to return to the easy roles you once played, to re-wear the mask that once made life manageable. You'll scroll mindlessly, shop for things you don't need, seek attention from places that never fed your soul, because that's what the world has taught you to do. Numb the knowing, escape the inner voice, decorate the cage. You'll hear people say, "You've changed," like it's an insult. You'll feel pressure to be normal, to be palatable, to go back to the version of you that didn't ask uncomfortable questions. You'll wonder if it's worth it, this path of solitude, this discomfort, this constant peeling back of illusion. And that is the moment to remember, growth is not the enemy. Comfort at the cost of your soul is. The world is invested in your amnesia because a person who sees clearly is harder to control. A person who feels deeply is harder to sell to. A person who stands firmly in truth cannot be manipulated by fear or swayed by the herd. That kind of person is dangerous to systems, to structures, to cycles of harm that rely on your silence and your sleep. So what does the world offer instead? Distraction. Constant buzzing, blinking distraction. It keeps you busy, keeps you comparing, keeps you consuming. It will have you chasing things you don't need to impress people you don't even like. It will have you measuring your value in likes and followers, in productivity and profit, in praise that feels sweet but never satisfying. Because as long as you're distracted, you're not listening. And as long as you're not listening, you're not aligning. But your soul doesn't want the noise. It wants the truth. It wants the slow mornings, the deep breaths, the quiet walks, the sacred no. It wants depth over popularity, presence over performance, meaning over momentum. The soul doesn't care how shiny your life looks. It wants to know, does your life feel like yours? There will be moments when you're tempted to go back, to dim your light so others feel comfortable, to pretend you don't care so you can fit into a conversation, to abandon your truth for approval. And each time you do, your soul will whisper, this isn't it. That whisper is not guilt, it's guidance. You must learn to stand in your truth even when it's inconvenient, even when it makes others uncomfortable, even when it costs you relationships, opportunities, or praise. Because if you betray yourself to belong, you will always feel alone. And if you trade your knowing for acceptance, you will always feel unseen. Awakening is not a one-time event. It's a daily choice, a decision to stay awake when the world tries to lull you into forgetfulness, a commitment to live with eyes wide open, heart wide open, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. And yes, it's lonely at first, but soon you start to find others like you. People who value truth over tradition. People who live from the inside out. People who aren't afraid to ask the hard questions, to sit in the silence, to walk away from what no longer fits. These are your people. You may not meet them in crowded rooms or noisy circles, but you'll recognize them by their peace, by their presence, by the way they speak in truths, not trends. So when the world tries to pull you back, when it offers you comfort dressed as connection, silence dressed as peace, or applause dressed as love, pause. Listen, ask yourself, is this calling me forward or pulling me back? Because once you've tasted truth, no imitation will ever satisfy again. And the ones who make it through, they're the ones who choose to stay awake, no matter how loud. There comes a time on the path when you must look yourself in the eye, not the self you show the world, not the one decorated with titles, filters, and performance, but the raw self, the soul self, the one who's been waiting patiently beneath all the masks for their turn to live. And in that moment, something sacred happens, a reckoning, not with the world, but with yourself. A deep, trembling realization that the version of you who got you this far cannot carry you any further. That version must die so the real you can rise. It doesn't happen all at once. It begins with cracks. Small moments when you say no when you used to say yes. Moments when you speak your truth even when your voice shakes. Moments when you walk away from the familiar even though your knees are trembling, and with every choice to honor what is real, something false begins to fall away. But here's the truth many don't speak. This death is not gentle. It's not poetic. It is brutal, sacred, and necessary. The old you will cling. It will cry. It will bargain. Because even if it was built on wounds, it was still familiar. Even if it was rooted in fear, it still brought you safety. That version of you was the survivor, the one who learned how to shrink to be loved, how to smile through pain, how to carry everyone else's weight and call it strength. And now you're being asked to let them go. You will grieve. You will grieve parts of yourself you thought you needed. The achiever, the pleaser, the chameleon who could blend into any room just to feel a little less invisible. These parts weren't wrong. They were brilliant in their own way. They helped you survive a world that didn't always see you. But now you are being asked not to survive. You're being asked to live fully, honestly, wildly. And to do that, the version of you built on fear must be laid to rest, not with shame, with reverence. Thank them, bless them, and then bury them, because they cannot come with you into this next chapter. You cannot hold both the truth and the lie. You cannot carry your past into your becoming. Something has to go. This is the death no one talks about. The funeral you hold for the self that was never really you, the one who agreed to things that broke your heart, the one who stayed silent to avoid conflict, the one who built walls and called them boundaries, the one who wore perfection like armor but cried behind closed doors. That self was an illusion, and illusions must die for authenticity to be born. And here's the thing, when you start living as your true self, the world might not recognize you. You'll no longer be who they remember. You'll stop showing up in ways that made others comfortable. You'll disappoint the stories they wrote about you. That's okay, let them. Their comfort is not your calling. You will feel naked at first, vulnerable, like you're walking through life without your old skin, but over time you'll notice something miraculous. Peace. Not the peace that comes from pleasing others, but the peace that comes from finally being honest with yourself. You'll feel light, you'll breathe easier, you'll sleep deeper, you'll laugh louder, not because life got easier, but because you stopped carrying the weight of pretending. The real you doesn't need to prove anything. The real you isn't here to perform. The real you doesn't shrink to fit or stretch to impress. The real you takes up space unapologetically, speaks truth fearlessly, chooses love, not as a transaction, but as a way of being. And that version of you, that's who you were before the world taught you to forget. But first, the old must go. The shedding will be painful. The death will be messy. But trust the process. Trust the fire. Because you are not being destroyed. You are being refined. And what rises from those ashes will not be a better version of your mask. It will be you, just you, raw, real, radiant. And that kind of aliveness, the kind born from death, is not just survival. It is sacred rebirth. It is soul resurrection. It is truth walking. And once you've tasted that kind of life, you will never again settle for anything less than what is real. There is a moment right before the shift, just before the light breaks through, when everything inside you wants to quit. Not because you're weak, not because you're incapable, but because the weight of becoming feels unbearable. That moment comes in the thick of the dark when progress feels invisible, when the journey feels like punishment rather than purpose. And that right there is the moment that defines most people. It's the edge of breakthrough. But sadly, it's also where many turn around. See, spiritual awakening is not a staircase, it's a wilderness, and walking through it feels like wandering with no map, no certainty, and no one clapping from the sidelines. It's raw, it's lonely, it tests you in ways no one prepared you for. People talk about the beauty of transformation, but few speak of the brutal middle, the part where you've let go of the old, but haven't yet stepped into the new. That's the space that breaks people, not because they're broken, but because they don't yet know they're birthing something sacred. Most people quit not in the beginning, but when they're almost there, when the silence gets too loud, when the healing takes too long, when their prayers feel unanswered, when the mirror reflects back someone unfamiliar. The ego will use that moment to whisper lies. You're crazy for trying to change. No one cares. You were better off before. And if you don't know better, you'll believe it. You'll retreat. You'll run back to comfort, to patterns, to people who required you to be less than you are. Not because they're bad people, but because they fit the version of you who never dared to grow. But the breakthrough is always on the other side of that ache. It's hiding in the resistance. And the resistance doesn't mean you're off track. It means you're touching the edge of something real. It's the body's last attempt to keep you small. It's the soul's growing pains as it stretches toward the life that's been waiting on you. You must remember, the darkness doesn't mean you failed. It means the light is about to shift. And light doesn't always arrive in fireworks or applause. Sometimes it enters in the stillness, in the realization that you no longer react the way you used to, that you're no longer begging for what you've outgrown, that your peace matters more than being understood. These are not small wins. These are signs of a soul awakening. The challenge is that the world is designed to reward speed and spectacle. If you're not announcing your every move, if you're not showing off your progress, it's easy to feel like you're falling behind. But growth is not a performance. Real growth is silent, messy, invisible, and it happens in the quiet hours where no one sees your tears, no one hears your prayers, and no one understands your path but you. This is where endurance matters. This is where your backbone is built, not in the comfort, but in the chaos, not in the ease, but in the choosing to stay the course, even when nothing makes sense, even when the old you screams to be resurrected, even when the new you hasn't yet found solid ground. Breakthrough doesn't arrive with warning. It comes suddenly, like light through a crack, but it only finds those who kept walking, who cried, cursed, doubted, and still kept choosing truth. Not because it was easy, but because going back was no longer an option. You must decide that the version of you who quit is no longer in charge, that the fear that used to rule you is now just a visitor, not a master. You must hold the line when your faith wavers, when your strength fades, when the world offers you 100 reasons to quit, because the moment you choose not to go back, that's the moment the shift begins. And no, it won't happen overnight, but one morning you'll wake up and realize the storm has passed. You'll feel different, clearer, lighter. You'll look around and realize you made it through something sacred, and what once felt like breaking was actually your becoming. Most people never get to that moment. They turn back at the door. They fold under pressure. They stop right when life was about to say, "Now watch what I've been building inside you." So don't quit. Don't silence your soul to make others comfortable. Don't trade your healing for temporary relief. Hold on. Because when the breakthrough finally comes, and it won't just change your life. It will reveal the version of you who was always waiting on the other side of pain, whole, unshakable, free. This path is not paved with ease. It is rough with truth, sharp with surrender, and soaked in tears. But it is yours. And if you're brave enough to walk it, you won't just survive your awakening, you'll become the kind of soul that sets others free. So the question is not, can you survive it? The question is, can you stand to meet the real you? Because once you do, there's no going back, and that is the beginning of everything.